show. It's the 29th of August, 1997. This is Victoria Ekegren interviewing, and I'm here with William Giannopoulos from
And
the
that's at
130
7:30 in the morning.
from the 134th. Why don't you go ahead and start and tell me, where were you born and what year?
All right, I was born in East Chicago, Indiana in 1925, January the 9th.
January the 9th. Was your dad in the First World War?
No, my dad was an immigrant. He came over from Greece in 1923.
How did World War I affect your dad, do you think?
My dad, I don't think it affected him very much.
Tell me about your dad.
My dad?
Mm-hmm.
Well, my dad was not an educated man. He came across when he was first married, and he worked in the steel mills, and then he went, and then his wife died. His first wife died back in Greece, and he left some family there, and then he went back in Greece and lied to the village, I'm a rich man, and as a result, he married my mother. That was a dowry he was supposed to have, and then they came across. They didn't bring any children with them. Later on in life, he did bring one daughter, which is my stepsister, and they moved to Chicago, and then from there they went to East Chicago in Indiana. And he lived there all his life until he passed away on June the 12th, 1942. That's the same year that I graduated from high school, and 1 week later he passed away.
What is the greatest characteristic that your dad has given you? What is the greatest lesson that you have learned from your dad?
Well, it's hard to say. He's given me a lot, but don't forget I was a younger kid then. I was just graduating from high school, 16, 17 years old. But stress family life, family unity, and take care of the family is one of the things that, and you don't have to be poor and enjoy a lot of things, because we didn't have too much at that time.
So tell me about your mother.
Well, my mother was born in Greece, and she married my father, who was an older person than she was. He was about 20 years older, something like that. And they both came across to the States in East Chicago, and she lived as a housewife all her life and raised 3 kids, and that was it.
So tell me about your siblings.
Well, I have 2 sisters, and one lives in East Chicago and one lives in Gary, or Maryville, Indiana, and they're both married, and they both have children. My older sister, Tony, she has 3 boys. One's in California, one passed away, and the other one lives with her. My younger sister has 3 boys, and one's in Dallas, Texas, and 2 are staying at home.
So how was life during Depression? What are some things that...
Well, let's put it this way. I really did not notice it too much, because we didn't have very much to be aware that you have more than I have, or I have more than you have. We lived in an area which was a lot of ethnic communities, and ours was a Greek community area, and everybody kind of looked out for everybody else. We weren't without too much, because my father worked, and my mother kind of washed clothes for people in the area, and they made wine down in the basement, and they sold the wine and to have subsistence around them. And of course, I had odd jobs here and there, newspaper routes and so forth, to help out with the family. But we were on relief, and my mother used to take me when I was younger, when we were on relief, and go to the relief office and get coupons and get food stamps and so forth. But in general, it was all right.
So what is something that the Depression taught you? A lesson that you carried with you?
Really not too much, to be honest about it, because I wasn't aware of a lot of things. And going to school, and there's no bus riding like you have now. You had to walk a mile and a half, 2 miles. You walked, and then you couldn't eat in school because you didn't have enough money. So you had to run back home for lunch and then run back to school again. But we were clothed fine. We had friends and so forth, and it didn't bother me that much.
So tell me about your schooling. How far did you get to go?
Oh, well, I graduated. I went to the 1, 2, 3 different elementary schools in town. Field School, Lincoln, Riley. And then I went to the high school, Washington High School. And there's something unique about that. I later went back to teach there and to become a principal of the school there. I graduated in 42, and my wife graduated in 42. She was a classmate of mine. From there, my father died a week later. I went to work in the steel mills as an electrician and as a welder. And then I got drafted, which is another story. I became a member of the draft board that drafted me. And from there, I got drafted into the service. I went to Camp Atterbury. And then from there, I got assigned to a AAA outfit, the anti-aircraft outfit. And we were at Camp, we can remember his name, Camp Gruber, which was down in Galveston area. And from there, I went to OCS school. And at the start of the OCS program, they initiated another program called ASTP, which was that Army Specialized Training Program. And I decided that I'm going to get out of OCS and go to college, because where in the world am I going to go to college with poor parents and poor, no finances that are involved? So I went to ASTP, and I went to Texas A&M to do all the initial screening periods, and then I took the tests for languages and I took the tests for engineering. I passed both. So I figured, well, hey, that's a good life for me, being the languages as an interpreter, and travel that way instead of being in the trenches and so forth. And they said, no, you can't be an interpreter. I says, why? He says, I can speak French, I can speak Greek, I can speak Spanish. And he says, no. He says, you don't have a college background for that type of work. He said, but you're going to go into engineering. So I went to an engineering college, Texas College of Mines and Metallurgy in El Paso, Texas. We were there for, 6 months, something like that, and then they disbanded that program. So, but at least I delayed the infantry type of training for 6 months. And they indicated, well, we have a medical training program. You want to go into that? I says, no way, I'm not medically inclined. So from there, I went to the 12th Armored Division. And as we were coming into the rows of lines of people being assigned to different units in the 12th, all I could hear was 56th Infantry, 66th Infantry, 495th Artillery. I said, I don't want to go with those outfits. So I told one of the sergeants that was next to me, who was keeping order in the rows, and he indicated that, why don't you go to the ordnance? And I says, well, I don't know anybody to say I'm going. He said, you tell the officer in line to see me, and I'll tell him to put you in the ordnance. So that's how I got into the ordnance. Camp Barkley, we went to Camp Barkley, did our training there, and then from there we went to New York, and then from New York we went overseas.
What kind of impact did Pearl Harbor have on your life?
Well, my buddy and I, before we graduated from high school, we wanted to join the Navy. And so we were going to leave school and join the Navy. But I couldn't pass the eye exam. I had the charts memorized, but I forgot. And he passed, so he went into the Navy. He became a career man in the Navy. and then I went back home and worked and so forth. And when I got the time for my number, in fact, I even have my own draft card. I have that saved. I tried to get a deferment because my mother and my two sisters were smaller, and they wouldn't give me deferment. And I said, well, how's my mother and my two sisters going to be able to live without my income? They said, well, we're sorry, you're 1A, you're going. I said, that's it. But other than that, Pearl Harbor didn't faze me that much at that particular time.
Tell me about meeting your wife. Yeah, how did you start?
My wife?
Uh-huh.
My wife was a classmate of mine in high school. We never went with each other. Never dated. Her parents were very old-fashioned, very strict. You had to have a chaperone when you went out, or her brother or my sister would come along. But we didn't really meet or get together till, I'd say, while I was in service. I was going with another girl at one time, and then we broke up a long time ago. And then I went in the service, and coming home on furloughs, and my older sister, she kind of fixed me up on a blind date with her. You know, I knew her all my life. I knew the family, knew everybody. And we kind of hit it off pretty good, and that's how I met my wife.
Okay, so where's your first meeting with the 12th Armored Division? Is that down in Camp Barkley?
Camp Barkley, yes.
Okay, what are some of your first impressions that you have when you come down to Abilene from Chicago?
Well, let's put it this way: it was a kind of a shock that we're going to an armored division. I thought maybe we might go to an Air Corps or something nice, you know, and I didn't know really what the 12th Armored Division was about until we got in that line. When I heard infantry, 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 I said, I don't want to get an infantry. So I had a kind of, not a bad vibes, but I didn't like the vibes as I was hearing until I got into the 134th, and we got a lot of nice guys there, and it was a different type of a job. And it was a job that was suited to me because I was working with electrical work, and I was working with welders, and I did a lot of work on tanks before I went into the service. There was a plant in East Chicago called Cast Armor Plant, and I worked there as a welder on the turrets of the M4 tanks.
What do you remember about Camp Barkley? Can you describe it to me?
Well, dusty marches. Some of my fellow compatriots that were there, some of the guys that, you know, after we went overseas, I never saw again. A lot of them lived in the Chicago area, and really, you know, I don't remember too much about it because we weren't at Barkley that long to say that I was attached to the area or anything along that line.
Did you ever go into town, and what would you do?
Oh yes, well we go into Abilene, and we go to the stores, to the restaurants, to the show, and I can remember one thing. There was a restaurant there that I visited quite frequently, and it was a Greek restaurant, and that's one of the reasons why I went there. And there, my wife's first cousin, he was an officer in the medical corps. He's a doctor, and he was in the medical corps, and we would meet there and with his wife, and we would talk about home and everything else, and about his cousin, my wife, and it was nice. And I still have pictures of our meeting there.
So during this time, are you just writing to your, what's your wife's name?
Catherine.
Catherine?
Yes.
Are you dating at this time, or how?
When I was in Camp Barkley, no. No, we weren't dating at that time. We started dating when well, I'll take it back. We started dating when I would have some furlough time, and I would come home on a 3-day pass or a week pass or something along that line. That's when we started dating. Basically, I didn't date her till then.
Did you play any sports in Abilene?
No, I did not play any sports in Abilene, although I did play sports in high school. I was on the basketball team and I was on the track team, but other than that was it.
Who are some friends you remember down in Abilene? Do you have one?
Abilene? Oh, I remember a lot of them.
Tell me about some.
Well, most of them lived in the Chicago area, and let's see. I'm trying to think. Antonovich was one. He was a record driver, and who else? Lesniak, Tony Lesniak. We called him Killer. He was mean and rough. He lived in the Chicago area. There were two or three others in that I can't think of their names right away. But I didn't pal with any one individual or two individuals, more or less as a group. And then we all separated after that.
What was the housing life?
I lived in the hut, or not a hut, one of those army huts with cots in there, and that's about it.
How's the atmosphere in the huts?
In a hut, that's fine. Everybody was congenial. You know, if you went on pass, you better come back with whiskey. You better come back with something, because Abilene was a dry town at that time. Is it still a dry town? I don't know. I haven't been back there. It's still dry?
No.
No? Okay. When I used to travel to Chicago and back, I used to have 2 suitcases, one with my clothes and one filled with whiskey bottles and so forth. And of course, we sold them and made some money out of the deal. If it cost me $4 or $5 at home, I would sell them for $10 a bottle, and that gave me some money to spend. But if you came back with nothing, you were in trouble. You had to come back with something. But basically, that's about it.
Tell me about your training. What are some things that you're doing?
Well, in training, they assigned me to a tech truck, and which was a welding truck. And they had, when I first came into the battalion, they gave me a T5 rating, a corporal rating. I had a private rating when I went at the ASDP, and they gave me a T5 rating. And there was a Sergeant Grifflingo who was in charge of the whole truck, but I did the driving and I did the cleanup and I did all the dirty work and the welding and so forth. Training as such, no, because I already had the experience of welding. So when I got there, weld that, weld this, do this and do that, and repair that truck, repair that tank. So that's the kind of training that I got. Nothing else other than firing the arms and going on marches and so forth.
Who are some of your officers in commanding?
Well, Lieutenant Gaines was one of our officers. Stadler.
Can you tell me about him? What does he look like?
Gaines?
What kind of person is he?
Oh, he's a very nice fellow. Very nice fellow. He comes to the conventions. I think he passed away recently. And he comes to the conventions and we talk. And there was Stadler. There was Holmes, Lieutenant Holmes, Lieutenant Stadler. Captain Jones, our captain for the battalion. Those are mostly the officers that I had to work with or deal with. There were others that were in there that come in contact with, but really not be associated with them quite a bit.
What was so great about them?
Well, they were all International Harvester Battalion men, first of all. That's how they got their commissions. They enlisted, and being International Harvester Battalion people in the business, more or less, not as a plain worker, but in the business. And most of them became officers, and they enlisted and they became officers. They were down-to-earth people, really.
How is the war affecting you at this time? Are you thinking that what's about to happen, and you're actually going to go over to Europe and fight a battle?
When?
When you're in Camp Barclay. What are some things that you
No, never thought about it. Never thought about it. I know that the war was going on in Europe, and we didn't know where we were going to go, and it really didn't affect me too much. The only thing I really didn't worry too much about it, because I know I would not be on the front lines, being in an ordnance. I would always be behind the lines and repairing and servicing vehicles and tanks and so forth. So it really didn't bother me. Although we had a few close calls, but it didn't bother me.
What did you in the barracks or in the huts that you lived in? Do you have any practical jokes take place?
Well, there are always jokes. There are always things that the individuals would do. Tie up your sheets, put sand in your sheets, you know, things along that line, but nothing real bad or anything. They're joking type of situations.
Do you remember any specific events you could tell?
Now, you know, you're talking about 45 years, 50 years ago. No, I really can't, to be honest about it.
So tell me about packing up and leaving Abilene.
We just got our orders one day, say pack up, put your duffel bag together, and we're going to take the train, and we're going to go to New York, and we're going to give you an APO number, and we're going to go to Europe. And that's just about it. And we just put everything together, and we just took off and went.
How's the transport?
We went by train, and it was a long trip to go across. I remember when we were in Texas A&M for the initial training, and they were indicating that, well, you're going to travel for 2 days and 3 nights, or 3 days and 2 nights. So I figured, hey, I'm going to go to school up in Chicago area, you know, from one part of Texas to the other part of Texas on the troop train. So it was all right. It wasn't, you know, I don't have too much recollection to say it was bad or not bad at all.
How many days were you on the train?
I don't remember. Really, I don't remember.
Where did you train before you went overseas?
I say, I was with the NA aircraft outfit in Camp Gruber in Galveston, and then that was the basic training that I had. Then I went to school, to the ASTP program, and then back to Berkeley with the 12th, and I did training at the 12th, and that was the only kind of training that I had.
Do you remember Camp Shanks up in New York?
Yeah, that was a camp that we went to, and
what final preparations did you take?
I don't think we were there that long. I know it was raining going there, and I know the weather wasn't too good while we were there. But I don't even think we got any passes to go out of Camp Shanks, because we were going to go overseas, so they didn't want anybody out. Someone might take off, who knows? But it wasn't very eventful as far as I don't remember Camp Shanks too much anyway.
Just tell me about the overseas trip. Describe that.
The overseas trip, I think we went on Empress of Australia, if I remember correctly. Very first 2 days out at sea, I was eating quite frequently and drinking a lot. When I say drinking, coffee, water, you know, orange juices and so forth, and I was sicker than a dog. And I learned very quickly after that not to have too many liquids in my stomach, so I don't get a overbalance of liquids, get my equilibrium going. So I used to eat crackers and bread and meat and so forth, and very little liquids, and I was all right after that. We were in a troop convoy. Sometimes I found we looked out on top deck and saw no ships out there at all. And so, well, what's going on here? You know, aren't we in a convoy? And then all of a sudden, you see, boom, a whole mass of ships going to England. We did have a few scares every once in a while. They had some sub-packs out there, but the trip was uneventful other than being sick aboard the ship. Other than that, I don't know how long it took us to get there, 6 days or something like that. And we arrived in Liverpool. I think one of the reasons why we arrived at Liverpool was our forward echelon material and stuff went to France, and then Patton took it over, just confiscated it and took it over for his Third Army. And So we had to stay over in England a little bit longer to pick up more trucks and more tanks and so forth. And we went to Tidworth Barracks and stayed there for a while. And while we were in Tidworth, I got one 3-day pass. So I went to London, and I went to the Red Cross Center. And as I signed in there, I saw a name, 2 names above me. One of my buddies from hometown was there, and he passed away since. And then I took the train and I went to Chelmsford, where one of my best man from our wedding was in the Air Force. And so I visited him for a couple of days. And that's the first contact I had with the war. Buzz bombs were coming over. And I asked my buddy Chris Karabatsis, I says, what's that? He says, that's a buzz bomb. I said, aren't we supposed to go hide somewhere? Being a young kid, he didn't know what was going on. And he said, no, he says, if you hear it, he said, you got nothing to worry about. He says, when you don't hear it, that's when you have to worry about it. And I had a nice time with him. He was the chief mechanic on the Flying Fortresses while they were there. And then I went back to camp, and then we shipped out after that.
So were you married at this time?
No.
Did you have any encounters with the British people?
The only contact I had with the British was on a 3-day pass. Really, that's the only time.
How about some of the food, the British food? Did you like the
Food. I really didn't care about the food because the Empress of Australia had the British food on the plane, and I didn't particularly like it. So if I went in town or something, I'd look for a Greek restaurant, and there's a lot of Greeks in London, and I would eat some Greek food and so forth, because I was back home. Greek food is that's all we had was just Greek food. American food, nothing.
Is the war starting to worry you at all at this time?
I'm sorry?
Is the war starting to worry you at this time?
No.
Still. Are you writing home to your family?
I'm writing home to my mother and my sisters and a few of my friends that I had back home from high school. But most of every one of my buddies and stuff, they were in the service at that particular time. And I started writing to my wife, and we got to know each other a lot better that way.
What are some things you're telling her about what's going on?
Oh, she knew more about what was going on than I did from the papers. You know, where are we going now? I don't know, but the papers would say where we were going, and she followed the 12th Armored Division through the papers. Now, of course, we couldn't write very much sending stuff back home, but it's you know, when she used to write to me, she used to tell me, "Oh, you were here and you were there." She says, "At the town we went through," because we would be driving through the towns and going quickly, and I wouldn't know what town. I kept a record of the towns that I did go through when we arrived and when we stayed, and when we left and what town we went to next. But some of the towns they were driving to, which we didn't stop, I don't remember what they were.
Okay, so how long were you in Chatsworth before you leave?
I'd say about a month, maybe, something like that. Guard duty, cleaning up, maintenance type of affair, and calisthenics, and that's about it. We didn't have anything else to do. We didn't have any individual type of combat training. Just take care of your vehicles and be aware that there's a war on. You're going to go over there.
Tell me about the trip across the channel.
That was a bad trip. We left, I don't remember if it was early in the morning or at night, and we were on an LST, and my vehicle was on the LST, and a few of my buddies were there, and the channel was very bad. It was at that time we were going, it was really, waves are coming up, and it was really bad, and we got sick. And one of my buddies, Irv Bailey, who lives in Washington, but he passed away in 1993, 94, passed away. was uneventful other than choppy and being sick aboard the LST. And we landed and then took off, and that was it.
How long did it take for you to go across the channel, and how many people did you have on the ship?
Well, on the LST, I don't know, there was about 3 or 4 vehicles, mostly tech trucks, no tanks or anything like that, because we were the service unit, and that's about it. I can't remember too much about that other than that.
What are your first impressions of France?
Well, my first thought was, are we going to go in the area in which they had the battle zones and the crossings and so forth? And we came through Le Havre and just went right on our merry way and didn't do very much stopping, no sightseeing or anything. And wherever we were needed, our company was assigned to the reserve part of the division, and we would just go wherever we were told to go. That's about it.
Did you talk to any French people? Did you speak French at the
I spoke French, but not real fluently, and a lot of the guys when we were traveling, going through a town, would indicate, hey, what did he say or what did they say, and I tried to translate as much as I could. But overseas, I had 2 passes really, a 1-day pass, and we went to Nancy, France, and then I had a 2-day or 3-day pass where we went to, I visited the Berchtesgaden and Oberammergau and things like that, and that was the only time that I had freedom to go anywhere. Other than that, we were with the company. And
how do you, what are some differences, just the scenery and France? What are some things you remember that are different compared to
well, the French villages were, passing through them were nice and clean. Outside, they had a lot of manure and from the cows and the fertilizers that they had. And in Germany, it was the same way. But I think Germany was a lot cleaner and a lot more picturesque, and the scenery was there. If I were to go back to Germany, I would go to the southern part of Germany and visit Bavaria, where we were at. But we've been back to France, my wife and I, on vacations, and I didn't particularly care for it too much. At this time now, they didn't. I don't think they care too much for the American people, but then it was fine. It was all right. Don't bother us. We were their saviors and God and so forth.
So were they excited to see you?
Yeah, they were. They would wave every time we would go by. They'd line up and they would wave and wish us luck and go get them and so forth. But they didn't know that we were not in the frontline troops. We were the back echelon, more or less.
So tell me about, what do you remember the first day? I know you were not in the battle directly, but what are some things that affect you the first time?
Well, the first time driving through, we saw a lot of dead personnel, soldiers, and that's when it first hit me that hey, that could be us, that could be me, that could be somebody else, and there were dead German soldiers and horses and animals and destroyed vehicles while we were driving, and that was the first impression that I really got. Little easy about, but later on, I did get affected a little bit more through some strafings, and the first jet planes of Germans they strafed us, and we did shoot down one, and I got pictures of me in one of the jet planes when it was down. But other than that, wasn't that much excitement in terms of action, except on guard duty at night close to the front and so forth, but that was it.
tell me exactly, what was your task during the war? What was your
My duties?
battalion trained to do?
Well, they would bring damaged tanks in, and we would repair them. Uh, my job was to repair any part of that needed welding, and we had our own welding unit in the tech truck, and we did acetylene, and we did gas, and we did the armored rod type of thing. We would put armor plate on the tanks, repair the tracks, and not the engines or anything like that, but just the outside body work, more or less. And they would bring in half tracks, and they would bring in Jeeps, and they would bring in some trucks and so forth, which needed to be welded back together again because they were falling apart. That was about it. That's what we did. And of course, our biggest work area was in the Herlisheim area, where they had our first big battle, where we took a lot of losses. And I can remember I worked on 10 tanks for 3 days and 3 nights, getting in, and we were in their tent, and you can see the shell fire and up ahead. There was 3 of us that did that, and we got the tanks finished and completed in 3 days and put them back in action. And our area got a Meritorious Unit Service Award for doing that particular kind of work.
If you look, sorry,
Go ahead.
If you look at the tanks, how are they? Do you think they're well built? And what are some problems that you may have with the tanks? What are the?
Well, I drove some of them, to take them back, but at that particular time, we call them coffins, and we didn't particularly care to be around them too much because they had too many young kids with Panzerfaust. They would shoot bazookas type of things into the tanks and disable the tank. And if it hits you, you're cooked on the inside. And I've seen too many tanks with holes about, like this. And that wasn't anything that I wanted to do. I had the good life, let's put it that way. When I say good life, I didn't have to see any actions or anything like that. It's not very comfortable being enclosed in a particular tank, and I give these guys a lot of credit for doing it.
Did you personally have any close encounters with the Germans?
No, not with German soldiers. Other than taking them back and capturing a few, and then they would assign them to us and say, "All right, take them back to headquarters and march them back and take them back behind the lines." And other than that, that's about the extent that I had contact with the German soldiers. With the Germans, when we were in villages and stay at some of the homes that we were there, we had contact with the villagers and so forth, but not the German soldiers as such.
Are you scared at this time, or how's the war affecting you personally?
Now?
Yeah.
No, the war isn't affecting me too much. I'm too old to worry about things like that. Between my heart attacks and operations and so forth, that doesn't bother me.
How about back then? What were some of your thoughts when you
I really wasn't scared, to be honest about it. I really was not scared. The only time that I got scared when we got strafed by that jet plane, and that was when the buzz bomb came over, which I didn't know what that was about. But seeing action and fighting, I didn't have anything to do with that along that line. It was an experience. That's all. That's about most I can say about it.
So tell me about Herlisheim.
Well, I was not in the Battle of Herlisheim. We were outside of it, and they would bring the tanks in, and then we would repair them, and then they would go back out. But that's about all that in fact, I didn't even know the battle was going on until they brought in the tanks. In fact, many times we didn't know what was going on because they wouldn't tell us anything. They said, "Okay, we're going here," and boom, and we would take off. Why are we going here? Who knows? And, you know, they didn't tell us very much as to where we were going, what we were going to do there. We just go there and then repair and send the vehicles back into action. Other than that, that was it. The only time that I really got into contact, if I remember, was we were going to Colmar, and we seemed to be moving at a pretty rapid pace, and all of a sudden we see the infantry going to Colmar, and they were clapping at us because we were going to be the forward echelon. And I talked to my sergeant who was sitting next to me. He said, "What the hell is going on? What are we doing out here?" And he said, "Captain made a mistake. Our captain made a mistake, Captain Jones." He says, we're just moving a little too fast. We're going ahead of the infantry." And so we stopped, and the infantry went by. And then pretty soon the tanks came by, and I can remember one time there's one tank where they had a stall, and he says they had some extra armor plate on their tank. And he says, "Could you weld the armor plate on my tank?" And I said, "Sure, no problem." I said, "How long you got?" I said, "It's going to take me an hour or so." And so we welded the extra armor plate. It was about a half-inch, about this much, half-inch. And they had to hold it because it was heavy. And when we went into Colmar, I saw that tank kaput. And that kind of, I said, well, I tried. And there was not very much that I could do. Because it didn't get hit. It didn't get hit on the side of the extra armor plate. It got hit in the front. And now I don't know whatever happened to the crew that was in there. So that's about far as I can remember, close as I got to the bit.
You told me that you had some encounters with the Germans. You had just the German civilians. Can you tell me about one of those events?
Well, the only contact when we would stop at a village, and stay for a day or two, and we would be billeted in some of the Germans' homes, and in contact with the people there. They seemed to be nice. They weren't anti or more or less toward us. And we would give them our washing to do, and we would give them soap, and we would give them some rations, and in payment for doing the washing and so forth. Other than contact, there was very little contact that we had with them because we weren't. They didn't come to us for anything. We went to them in a little way.
How are they receiving you compared to the French? What are some of
I think the Germans, I think, well, we traveled so fast through France that I didn't have too much contact with the French people. Mostly, I had more contact with the German people because we would stay longer in one particular place. We went through a lot of cities and traveled a lot, and I wish I had a list in there of the places that we did go to. But I met my first cousin in Germany, in Augsburg, and he was with the 101st Airborne, and I saw his insignia, and I found out where he was located, so I went to visit him. And a couple of days later, he came to Augsburg, and he visited me in my particular unit. He found out where I was at. I told him, and that was the only contact from back home I had over there.
How do you think your attitude changed during the war? You know, just to the war, and you know, how does your personality change?
So I'm still the same as I was then. I'm outgoing. I'm not an introvert. I'm an extrovert, and nothing bothers me too much.
How about the letters? How many times do you receive letters from home?
Oh, I received letters from home quite a bit. I used to write a lot of email back home, and the letters would come quite frequently from my sisters, from my present wife, Kay. And they would tell me where some of my buddies were. They would from talking to their relatives, and what happened, who passed away, who didn't, who got killed, and so forth. But the letters are very, very, very good. They were, kept your spirit up a little bit.
How do you how do you look at your friends? How's your friendship? You know,
With my friends?
With your friends, like overseas, how's that? How's the interaction? You know, with the war going on, are you guys growing closer to each other? Or?
Oh yeah, we depended upon each other. I dealt with a crew of about 6 or 7 that we hung around together, and we did the same kind of work together. And I would have to say that out of that 6 or 7, there are maybe 2 or 3 are still alive today. The rest have passed away. Although you have to remember that I was real young at the time when I was in. I was like 18 years old, and the others that were there, who were with the 12th, they were a little older than I was because they enlisted. A lot of them enlisted, and of course they're much older than we were. When I say older, I can remember the first time my wife attended the conventions with me. She said, "Yeah, there's a bunch of old men and old people over here." And I said, "What the heck do you think we are?" We're old men and old people too. But no, I seen maybe 2 or 3 of them in the conventions, and we lost track. People move and so forth, and I have been able. There's one person that I know who was with me who lives in South Bend, and I keep calling, and I keep having a telephone when we go visit her brother in South Bend. And I can't get a hold of him, so it must be the wrong person. But other than that, there isn't. I'd like to see a lot of some of those guys, and but I don't think it's going to be possible.
What are some things you guys do when you're not fighting a battle?
Drinking, sleeping, trying to keep out of harm's way, keeping out of the office way so you don't get any extra. Didn't volunteer for anything. That's about it. We were on the go, on the move quite a bit, and so keeping the vehicle serviceable and moving, and for inspection purposes and so forth.
Tell me about the Christmas that you spent overseas.
First Christmas. I think that we were. I think we were in France then. Yeah, we were in France, and we were ordered to dig a foxhole and not sleep in the tech truck, and so we slept in the foxhole, and we got up in the morning, and there was snow all over us. We were covered with snow, and then we went to the mess hall, and we had turkey and this and that and so forth. We had a good time. We didn't have any Christmas trees or anything like that, but we had a good time. As far as I can remember, we did.
When did you miss home most?
Well, let's put it this way, I was pretty well on my own. And I missed home, my friends, my 2 sisters and my mother, and they relied on me, and I used to send them money from my check. But to say I missed East Chicago, I missed the home, I missed this and so forth, this is a normal type of a situation, nothing abnormal about it.
What was the worst day from the war? What would be a really bad day? Would be
the worst day for me during the war was when we got strafed, and I built at the time it was cold, and I built a little fire in the foxhole to keep myself warm. Then we got strafed, and I burned my hand here a little bit when I put my hand to get out of the line. The next worst day was going through the Alps, and we were going through the mountains, and there was not very much room to travel your tech truck, and I wouldn't drive it because I figured it was going to go over. But they did say if you feel it slipping, just jump out and let the damn truck go over. And I told my sergeant, I says, I'm not driving this daggone thing. We're going to go over. And he said, well, I'll drive it. So he got in and he drove it, and we got into the clear in some of the areas, and I went back to drive. The next worst day would be working the 3 days and 3 nights on those tanks and getting them ready. And we didn't have too much sleep. We just one shift after another going. After that, when I got separated from my outfit, when the war ended, and they said that we were going to go overseas to the Pacific Theater of Operations because I didn't have enough points to stay in. Other than that, that was it.
Okay, at Harlesham, why do you think you had so much extra tank work that one?
Because we were losing the battle there, and they really clobbered us pretty bad, and we occurred heavy losses, and a lot of equipment was being damaged and put out of action. And they would send the wreckers and the tank carriers over to pick up the tanks because we were short of tanks too, and so they would bring them into our area, and we would have to have a quick repair job and put them back in the action. That was there. We were outnumbered quite a bit. As now you understand, I wasn't there in the battle itself, but from what they were telling us.
What do you remember about Patton?
The only thing I remember about Patton would be what we read about in the newsletters that would come out, and he's rushing through doing this, doing that, and then we got assigned to his army, and but to see the man, to see the man, or to know him, I really had no reaction one way or another. I understand he was a pretty good general. He wouldn't do anything the others wouldn't do. So.
Did you notice, how did the fast movement towards the Rhine affect you?
Well, you know, keep driving and keep driving and keep driving. We were driving at night with our night lights on, and I remember one time we were going from in the Alps coming down, like I was saying, coming down and going to the Colmar area. We drove for 3 days and 3 nights almost, just kept driving and stopping for gas and stopping for rations and so forth till we got to the Colmar area, and then we stayed there for a while. But driving the truck didn't affect me too much. I had a license to drive a lot of equipment, and it was just a job, and that's the way I looked at it.
How did it feel crossing the Rhine? When do you guys have a feeling that you're winning the war?
I don't know what I was winning the war. We didn't know very much about anything. They, you know, where are we going? I don't know. You'll find out when you get there, and things like that. Who was winning the war, and what divisions and what infantry companies and what this was doing, where they were at. I didn't know too much about that, and because they didn't tell us anything, and we couldn't find out.
The newspaper Stars and Stripes.
Yes.
Receive it?
Yes.
How does that newspaper affect your lives? I mean,
it did affect my life. It was interesting reading, and giving news from back home, giving news abroad, and so forth. That's about all. But it didn't really affect me. But it was good to have. At least I could find out what was going on through the paper. Not that everybody they knew about it, but as far as I was concerned, I didn't know what was going on, more or less.
What are some things that make you smile when you think back at the war? Are there anything that you can?
Oh yeah, there are a lot of things. I remember one time our Captain Jones, I was put on guard duty at a motor pool, and this motor pool was outside of our camp area, and it was a motor pool that had 2.5-ton trucks with food in it, vehicles that would supply the area. And he said to our mess sergeant, he says, Giannopoulos, this is Greek, he says, you better come back with some food. And I mean slabs of steak and slabs of, eggs and so forth. And if you don't bring them back, I said, but I'm on guard duty there. I said, you come back with food or don't come back at all. So two of us, and we were on guard duty. We would open up the trucks to see what was in there. We'd see slabs of steak, and we would take a slab and put it in our little Jeep, which we had, and eggs and butter and so forth. And then we would bring them back. Of course, I never saw the steaks. The mess people and the officers and the captain had steaks. That was one. Another one was we were in a wine village area, and we raided the factory, and we had a small little wagon in the back of our tech truck that we pulled, and we loaded it with champagne, boxes and boxes of champagne. And of course, that's all we drank was champagne. And we even took baths in champagne. We had so much of it. And I got to the point where I had a distaste for it after a while. It didn't bother me, and I had a distaste for it. And even to this day, I don't like champagne very much. I'll drink sparkling wine, nasty spumante stuff, which I like. But the champagne itself is just like vinegar, is what it tastes like to me now. That was another occasion. Other occasions were when I met my cousins, and we rehashed the family life. It was my first cousin on my father's side, and we see each other quite a bit back home. Well, his parents died, and my parents have passed away, and we're the last of the Giannopouloses. He, Angelo, and his brother Art, and my son Jim, and my grandson Jimmy, and his son George are the only Giannopouloses left of the family tree. And so I have pictures of everybody together to show that this is the group. Every once in a while we have a few arguments, but other than that, that's the extent of our good times.
What are some things you used to do with your cousin when you guys got together?
Well, when we were little kids, my father used to take me and visit the cousins in Chicago, and we used to play ball, and we used to visit. They were always in business. His brother in the confectionery store business, making candy and soda fountain, etc. But they are from Chicago, and we were from East Chicago, and they looked down upon little East Chicago as the down, we're big city boys and so forth. But that didn't bother me. They were my cousins, and they enjoyed themselves. They talked big, and they grandeur ideas and so forth. And I said, that's great, that's wonderful, and so forth. And in one ear and out the other. And to this day, they're still that way, with the exception of one of his brothers. He live in Chicago, but they reside in Boca Raton most part of the year, and we go visit them. They're pretty well normalized. And the other cousin, Angel, I like very much, is still a big city boy, How can you live in a small city? How can you do this and how can you do that? But extent-wise, that's about it for them.
When you're over fighting the war, are you making plans for what you're going to do after?
Not really. I didn't know what I was going to do. I really didn't know. At that particular time, I was thinking of getting married, with my wife. And we finally did get married, but we got on a 30-day furlough. We got married. I didn't have any ambitions in terms of I was going to go back to the steel mills, and I had a job back there and work back there, and until I decided that that's not for me. That's why I went to school after that.
Did you take part in did you see any of the concentration camps?
Well, but I did not see the actual concentration camps. But one of our sergeants who was in the instrument repair went with Captain Jones and our driver Tannehill, went to the concentration, and he took pictures. And I had a copy and a set of the pictures that he took. I wanted to bring them down here, but They were in one of the boxes up in the attic, and I wasn't going to go up in the attic and look through the boxes. I just brought stuff down that I could readily have available. Uh, they were pretty gruesome, and it got to the point where it was pretty hard to believe people would be doing things like that. And from what I understand, they went into town, got the mayor and got the people and brought him into the concert. We didn't know anything like that was going on. I think that they captured a few of the SS people that were there. But as far as actually being in the camp and seeing the camp, no, I did not do that.
Did you see him change and you were captain after he went in there and came back? What did he say about it when you asked him?
Never talked to him about that. And of course, he never came down to us to talk to us about anything like that. In fact, I didn't even know that they were there, to be honest about it, until Hartwig made copies of some pictures, and then I got a set of them. But that's to the extent that was about it. And if Hartwig didn't make copies, I still probably wouldn't have known that they were there.
When did you know that the war was coming to a close?
We stayed longer and longer in one place. You know, we stayed long in Augsburg, we stayed long in Colmar, and we had less and less vehicles to repair, and they were finding a lot of odd jobs for us to do, clean up, do this and do that, take this apart and re-put it back together again, and so I knew it was coming close to an end. And then when it did end, I did not have enough points, because I was the youngest guy, to stay with the division, and they shipped me out. And a lot of them were shipped out to other divisions, but for me, they shipped me out to go to the 86th Infantry Division, to go overseas to the Pacific War. And I think from there we went to, well, that was another story. We went to Le Havre, and some of the other guys from my outfit went with us, and then from there we 2 days out of New York, the war was over in Japan, and we had a big celebration aboard the ship. Then I got a 30-day furlough, and I got married on that 30-day furlough. And from there we went, I got assigned to go to Camp Gruber, Oklahoma. That was outside of Muskogee, Oklahoma. My wife came, and we lived in a little garage type of a deal, and I had a vehicle, Jeep that I can take out. I was assigned to the motor pool, and I had a vehicle I can take out every night, so I'd be home every night and go back. And we were getting ready to be shipped to the West Coast to go to the 86th. And one of my buddies said that we have enough points to stay in the States. And we would have enough points to stay in the States if we were to claim another battle star. Well, I said, we can't claim any battle stars. And he indicated that, yeah, well, we were in the Battle of the Bulge. And when we left, our company clerk did not have enough time to put it on our papers. Well, I went nowhere near the Battle of the Bulge. But part of our outfit was there. And he said, how would they know? Sign up. Let's sign up and say we got another battle star. So we went into the adjutant general. He said we were there. And he says, well, he pulled a big map off the wall. And yeah, he says the 12th was there. There were some assigned units there. I said, we were with one of those assigned units. We weren't. And we didn't want to go to Pacific. So they gave us a battle star. We had to sign affidavits to the effect. What the hell can they do to us once we're gone? So they gave us another battle star, and they gave us enough points to stay in the States. So we got shipped out of Camp Gruber, and they sent me to Fort Knox. And I was doing PW duty there. I got there for a month or so, and then we got discharged. Just like that. I was fortunate, being in the right place at the right time and lie.
When the war ended in New York, what do you remember about that day? Were you you still, were you
Yeah,
in
we were
Germany?
still over. We were still over.
What do you remember about that day when the war ended?
Oh yeah, a few bottles come out that were hidden, and a few little drinking parties, a little dancing, celebrating. That's about it.
Do you remember people's faces? What did they?
Well, really the ones that I associated with, we all palled together, so we were all together, and a lot of them were enlisted people with the company. There's 2 or 3 that were with me with the ASTP program that came, but they were not in my section. They were in other sections. We just had a good time. The war is over. We survived, and nothing bad happened to us. I know from our company, just one person died, and that was by an accident. His vehicle overturned, and he got killed. But as far as anything else is we had a few POWs from we got captured, but other than that, and I didn't even know they were POWs, to be honest about it, until I read it in the Hellcat News and so forth, and who they were. And there was one from my company that was there.
Since you're in the ordnance, do you have any contact with POWs during the war?
The only POW contact we had during the war is when we would stop and you get a detachment would come in and say, we have some POWs, we can't take them back to the rear echelon. This is what you guys take them back. And we would see them along the line marching. And the only other POW contact that I had would be in Fort Knox when they were stationed, when they were put there for the duration of the war. They seemed to be all right. They didn't give us any problems or any trouble along the line. That's the only POW action that I had contact with.
What was your first thought when the war is over in Europe? What was your first thought? What was the first thing you
It's over. I'm going home. I'm going to go home. And when I'm going to go home is another story. And it was sooner than I thought I would go. A lot of the guys still stayed overseas. They didn't get home till May, January, February, March of the following year, because they were stationed they were shipped to other outfits. I left in August, September, something like that, of 45. And they were still there in 46. So in one way, I was home earlier than they were.
So when did you know that you wanted to marry your wife?
On the 30-day pass, on the 30-day furlough, we talked about it, and we said, well, let's elope. And she says, no, my father would kill us. So we didn't. We had a church wedding. We invited people to come to the church and so forth. And then we took off on a honeymoon, and we went to up in Wisconsin, one of the resort areas up there. I know the name, but I can't think of it right now. And we came back, and then I got shipped out. And I went to my other camp in Muskogee, Camp Gruber, and then my wife followed. And we stayed there for a month or two, and then she went back home, and I went to Fort Knox. And she came and visited me a couple times, but didn't stay. Then I got discharged from Fort Knox.
What did you do after the war for a living? Did you go back to school?
Well, after the war, we got married, and I went to work back at Inland Steel at the steel fabricating plant, and I was there as an electrician. And I asked finally, after a year or so, I asked the electrician, my boss, that I would like to become his clerk so that I can go to school in the evening. And he says, good idea. And so he went to the superintendent, and the superintendent says, no. He says that we have in mind for that job a war veteran, someone who was wounded and so forth. So I got kind of teed off, and I says, hey, I'm here in the mill. I know the whole mill. And being a clerk in the mill, I says, they can always use me as backup personnel. And he says, no. I said, well, what the heck do you think I am? I'm a war veteran. I says, I got wounded. I didn't. I says, I got wounded. And he says, well, we found out later on he was hiring one of his relatives for the job. So I gave him 2 weeks' notice right then and there. And I says, I'm leaving. I want to go to school. And the only way I can go to school is go at night, support my family, work during the day, support my family. And he says, well, good luck to you, and so forth. And I said, well, thank you. I quit after that. And then I started school at the extension centers, Indiana University Extension Centers. And I used some of my credit from the ASTP program. And after a year and a half, I couldn't take any more work at the extension center because they had a rule at that time. You had to have maximum work you can do. There were 60 hours. Then you had to go down to campus after that. So I got my 60 hours in, and another year and a half later, going to summer schools, I graduated. I graduated in education, and I did my in math and science. We were down at Indiana. We lived in a trailer court, and cost us $25 a month to live in the trailer court. And I had my oldest daughter, Nancy, was born then. And I worked in the commons area for 75 cents an hour and got my meals half priced, which was the most important thing. And we lived on Chef Boyardee quite a bit. Then I also tended the kerosene camp area for the trailer courts, and got paid for doing that. And of course, I had the GI Bill rights, and I was getting $125 a month to live on for the whole month, while I was in school. Of course, I had my books and my tuition and everything else paid for. But I graduated in education as a math and science teacher, and got my first job from there in a town called Charlestown, Indiana, as a math teacher, high school math teacher. $2,400 a year was my salary. Well, at that time, $2,400 wasn't that bad. It was good, but it wasn't that bad. It was still less than most of the cities would be paying. It was a small town. And then I got an offer a job in New Albany, Indiana for about, well, $2,800, $2,900, which is $200 more, so I took that job. And then my city from back home, East Chicago, called and said that we have a job for you paying $3,500. Well, from 24 to 35, it's a lot of money. So I took that job, and I taught in the self-contained classrooms in elementary school for 5 years. I taught 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, just mathematics only. Then I went to the high school. After that, I applied for a position in the high school, and I got that job, and I stayed there for 5 years teaching high school math. After that, I applied for an administrative position, but in the meantime, I was going to summer schools for my master's degree, and I got my master's degree and graduated in 50, got my master's degree in 53. And I did other graduate work toward my doctorate, but I didn't have enough money to stay on campus and do the work. And all the profs were saying, well, we'll be on your committee, don't worry about it, and so forth. We'll give you a teaching fellowship. And I said, no, I can't afford it. I just don't have the money and the time to develop that. So when I got my administrative license, I became supervisor of mathematics for the school city. And there was, at that time, there were 6 elementary schools, 2 junior high schools, and 2 senior high schools. So I was in charge of the math program for the whole city. I did that for 11 years. And then the principalship of the high school opened up, and I applied for that. My wife didn't want me to get that job, but I got it, and I stayed for 3 years on the position. And we were having a lot of problems with the ethnic groups, the Spanish and the Latinos and the black people, and they wanted to have a new principal because one of my vice principals indicated some language what was not common to them, and as a result, that they were going to fire him, and if they fire him, then I says, next thing I know, they're going to fire me. So they asked me what I wanted to do, and I says, well, I'll tell you what. I says, the gentleman that you appointed as a supervisor, when I got the principalship, you make him the assistant principal of the other school where they wanted, the other high school. And I says, you put me back in his position, and I'll be happy. I'll take cut in salary, and I'll be happy. And that's what happened. I went back to my supervisory job, and I retired in '87.
What is the greatest lesson that you have with you from the war?
From the war?
Uh-huh.
Well, camaraderie, working together toward a common end, love of the family, getting back together with a family and trying to hold it together, have those type of ideals and so forth. Surviving, and it's a memory, good memories and bad memories, that's about it.
What has been your contact with the 12th Armored Division Association?
Well, I joined the association when the first association came out, and I went to the very first meeting in outside of Chicago, my company meeting, not the division, but the company meeting. I have pictures of that, and some of the guys they're no longer here, and I don't remember some of the names that have been so far back, and I didn't write them down on the back because I figured I still would remember them. Becoming a member, a lifetime member, 513, and coming back and revisiting and making acquaintances with a lot of my buddies that were there. I mean, I did not know them well, but I did know them. We were acquaintances, let's say, and even right now we're very good friends. We write to each other, we call each other up, and we look forward to seeing each other every year. And of course, we're getting old, and a lot of them are passing away. And I remember one time in Las Vegas when we had the meeting, I was going to receive an award from our battalion for service done to the battalion. That one of my buddies, Herb Bailey, who we crossed the channel with together, he came to the Las Vegas meeting, and my daughter and her husband flew up for the meeting. And I guess they must have known that I was going to receive an award, so they came up and flew up to the meeting. And Bailey met my daughter and her husband, and he was telling stories about me, stories I couldn't even remember. My dad did this, my dad did that. No way. 6 months later, he died, and that was the first time I seen him since the war. And meeting some first timers for quite a while was nice to know and to see and meet. We've become a lot of friends, and meeting a lot of my ASTP buddies who were in the division. A lot of them were assigned to the infantry, and there are some in the ordnance. And one of those friends of mine who became president of the association, Gil Heine, and we see each other every year. I remember back in '87, we were in Kansas City, and he patted me on the back and he says, "Hey, Greek." I looked around. I said, "Who are you?" You know, I didn't recognize him, and he had his nameplate covered. Even if he had his nameplate, I wouldn't have remembered. He says, "Don't you remember me?" And I says, "No." I says, "How the hell do you remember me?" He says, "I can tell you." He says, "What school you went to?" I says, "You can?" He says, "Yeah, you went to College of Mines." "Yeah, I can tell you what room you slept in." I said, "This can't be my roommates." I said, "No way." And he says, "I'm the one that came through the window after hours and broke his arm and fell out and broke his arm." Then I remembered who he was. And we became real good friends. And every year we see each other at the convention. And it started out with 5 guys from the ASTP program from the College of Mines. And we call ourselves the Fabulous Five. And then we found out another guy, and we became the Fabulous Six, and then we found out another guy, Fabulous Seven. But this guy now, Dale Washburn, he took a real deep interest in trying to find out where all the ASTPers came from and what outfits they were in and where did they go into 12. And he compiled a list of everybody in the AST program for all the different colleges, not just from College of Mines, and I have that list with me too. Um, and we're all good friends. We didn't really pal around together, but we were good friends at our conventions, and we would sit together and have dinners, and so the wives become real good friends, and that's part of the unity of some of the members of the 12.
Are there some other stories, other events that I have missed that you would like to mention?
Well, I know that that coming back and forth from Camp Barkley, I used to travel with one of the guys from the ASTP program, and he was in my battalion, and we traveled back and forth. No, that's about it.